Welcome to Discuss With Us podcast, where we are unpacking the world through a Christian lens. I am your host, Darcy Durkowski, along with my husband, Brian, and our intention is to pose topics, trending and otherwise, and unpack them with the help of some research, insights from our different backgrounds, and even some listener input in a way that is thought-provoking and entertaining. So get comfortable, grab your favorite beverage, and discuss with us.
Welcome back to another episode of Discuss With Us. Darce, how you doing?
I'm good. It was a busy weekend, but we're ending it with a little rain here tonight, so I'm very happy. Considering I shred our pastures and had a little bit of immediate regret.
It was on its way to dust.
Being
Hopefully
crunchy.
We've offset it.
Yeah, just needed a little bit. So, it was a good weekend. Busy. We have, if you're local to us, it's fair time.
Yes. County fair time. It's kicking off over here.
We went to the ranch rodeo last night, and it was a lot of fun. I know why they have to wait and do it late, start it late at night, because it was so
hot,
so stinking hot this weekend.
Only one kid fell in the bleachers of ours. So it's only 1 out of 3. That's good.
Yeah, but I wish we could have stayed for longer because it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it was a good time.
Yeah. Okay. Tell us what we're talking about this week.
Well, if those of you who didn't know, there's a little thing happening in November called the election. And
dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, and they've been doing debates, and the candidates are out there doing their thing. And I was thinking, what would be interesting is to look at this not from a
certain
party, Democrat or a Republican side, but just more of what should we do if we are Christian?
Yeah.
How should we look at these things and vote? And I'll be the first to say it's really hard to try to separate the two. And I go back and forth no matter what candidate I'm wanting to support or vote for. And not just in presidency, it can be any local or state election really at all. But are you getting swept up in things of the world, or how should you be voting? Where should you stand on things? And some of them are more obvious than others. I think they make a lot of natural sense to go one way or the other. But other subject matters can be really hard to try to figure out where you stand on them.
Yeah.
And so I thought, they had the debate recently, and there's a few topics that come up time and time again, especially it feels like this time around, there's a lot of kind of moral dilemmas to put yourself in.
Yeah.
And just kind of where you should maybe, not going to say.
How you should, not even where you should fall, but like what you should look at and what you should consider.
What you should be thinking about and considering. And so I thought we would talk about that. And Darcy really wanted to lead the way on this.
That's not true at all. When he first brought up the topic, I was like, okay. And I only say that because he's very plugged in, and I tend to, back off of some of that stuff, which we'll talk about at some point in this conversation. But when you were telling me kind of what you wanted to look at and how you wanted to look at it, I settled down a little bit because I was like, okay, so this isn't like a blue versus red
we're not sitting here to tell
conversation.
You who or how to vote. You can come up on that decision on your own.
Yeah.
All we're going to do is talk about some of these big topics and how you should think. And
because I thought it was kind of a refreshing practice to, because most of us, I would say very few people, I shouldn't say very few, but most people grow up and vote the way they were raised, or at least that's their foundation.
Yeah.
Maybe they stray a little bit or vary on a few topics or just their personal preference in people, but it's, you typically have that background. And so
right.
When you were bringing this up, it was like, seeing this through a Christian lens, like we talk about,
yeah, right.
it does make you like reconsider things that you would have just been like, oh yeah, this is how I feel about that.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to also make clear, I don't think either side in this is 100% right.
Yeah,
There's
we
just
talked about
judgment
that
calls for you.
earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's calls for you to make on it. And when I thought of this before the debate even happened,
Yeah.
and then I felt like it obviously was the right choice because the Pope had to come out and talk on it himself. So I thought we'd start right there.
Okay.
So Pope Francis came out, I think it was Friday, and said when trying to decide on who to vote for in the presidential election, you need to pick the lesser of two evils. His quote was, "One must choose the lesser of two evils. Who is the lesser of two evils? That lady or that gentleman? I don't know. Everyone with a conscience should think on this and do it." So that obviously causes a stir, especially for those of us who are Catholics. Some people wish you'd say more. Some people wish you'd say less. Just to kind of clear up the point there, the Pope is just a person, obviously in a higher station than you or I, but
In the church.
yeah, in the church. But what he says is, when it's something like this, it's just words. It's just a interview. This isn't a
Canon law statement or something.
yes. So, and I think that point gets confused even among
Misconstrued.
Catholics. But when he's talking and giving interviews like that, obviously the words he says carries weight.
Yes.
Really amongst all Christians. You don't have to just be Catholics. A lot of different Protestant faiths look and listen to what the Pope says, but when he is just talking in an interview form, that's just a suggestion. He's not saying anything one way or the other, and the only thing a Pope can do that is binding would be changing in canon law, and that very rarely happens. I don't even know the last time it did. So if you hear something out there that the Pope says one way or another, that's just an opinion.
Yeah, well, and I think what you're kind of getting at here is a lot of times, like the Pope doesn't necessarily, in these situations, it's not like he's speaking or like making a judgment call for the Catholic Church, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, and I myself will say, I read that quote and I was like, ugh. And I don't know, it can be Taylor Swift, it can be the Pope, it can be any public figure. And when someone says something for the team you're rooting for, a lot of times you're like, yeah, say more. And then when they don't say exactly what you want to say, or they go against who your person is, then you're kind of like, oh, you shouldn't talk at all.
Don't use your platform for that.
Yeah, exactly. I think I end up more on the, you don't have to talk about it at all. Everyone can just make their own opinions most of the time. But it is just their opinion, and you don't have to be swayed one way or the other. It's just something people can say. So that kind of takes care of that part of it. But then I was like, all right, we are going to do this because Pope had to dance around himself on it. So I was like, well, let's get into it. Let's talk about what are some of the big topics. And there's two. I came up with three. And actually now as I'm sitting here, I'm going to make 3/4. But the biggest two that kept coming up are immigration in this country and abortion. And abortion we'll go with first. I think that's almost the simpler one to talk about. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know if I would call it simple, but yes, go ahead.
So there is the first thing we have to kind of get out there is, does life begin at conception? I think most, if not all, forms of Christianity agree on that.
I think so.
To some degree or not. And we get in this political world and it gets very difficult to know, like, well, where should I stand on this if I'm a Christian? I'll be the first to say I am a male. I've never had to deal with this or anything like that. So I am just talking off my own
What
theory
you know.
here. We believe life begins at conception, and therefore abortion would be considered murder and is wrong.
Yeah, and I think especially the Catholic Church teaching on um, marriage and sex also kind of, how the church views it plays into this as well.
Right.
Because it's for a lot of us, like, we are open to life. And I think that kind of sets the stage for how we would feel about abortion and when life begins, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm also going to separate. So I think America is, in large part, a Christian nation. And I go back and forth with this because, from my own belief, I think the belief of the majority of those of us who live in this country, we all kind of agree if we're looking at it through the religious lens. So the problem that pops up is America is the great melting pot. And that means you don't have to be Christian. We've got all different walks of faith and life in this country.
And I think America makes a big deal about our rights.
Yes. Yeah, no, and that's what I'm going to say. It's ironic because it shouldn't be tricky, but it is. It always feels tricky, and I think part of it is I think we've been a little bit gaslit with the terminology that gets thrown around because it's women's rights, it's reproductive rights, it's all these terms and things they throw out there, and then do you want to
You second guess, yeah.
Well, and then do you want to impose your beliefs on someone who may not have the same?
Right.
Ironically, the way it's kind of being set up now. So if you've been under a rock, Roe v. Wade has been overturned, and overturned in the sense that the power left the federal government. It's with the individual states now. So Roe v. Wade from the Supreme Court, that was a Supreme Court ruling. So that became a federal law. Now it's back to the states. And to me, that's like the best way it could be.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if all the states actually at this point have voted on it yet. But essentially, you can have California vote to say abortion's legal here to here, or have their own specific rules. Do they want to have exceptions, a strict cutoff date, things like that? And like I said, I sit here and I don't agree with it. If I had my way, it would just be illegal across the board. But I and maybe this is me gaslighting myself again. I'm like, well, just because I believe that doesn't mean everyone does. But I think it gives each state the opportunity, because here's the thing. We all live in America. So if you live in California and that state votes to legalize abortion and you just don't agree with that, you have the right to move and move to a state that agrees more with your beliefs. But then we're all part of America, because I was thinking this the other day. What's the point of having 50 states?
Yeah.
The whole point is supposed to be we kind of have our own values, our own rules,
It's all a little bit different.
our own laws, but then we all band together in a time of need and we're all one nation. And I think some of that has gotten lost, and on both sides. Everyone wants to, if you're voting for Donald Trump, you want Donald Trump to fix the whole country. If you're voting for Harris, you want Harris to fix the whole country. And I guess there's some truth to that, but really it comes back to your own individual states. That's how it really should be. Are you happy living, and we live in Texas, or the state that you live in? And so from a Christian standpoint, the Bible's pretty clear on abortion is considered murder. It's not good. We should not agree with that. But if you want to take the lens of, okay, that's fine. That's Christianity. What about people who don't agree with that or aren't religious because our country isn't supposed to be binding to you in one set of religion? Mm-hmm. Then to me, the each state having their own thought is maybe a little better.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I think that we were talking about this the other day. I think if we were to sit down and ask most people we know, not many people are championing abortion.
Yeah, I think that's one of the weird things with it.
But then, there's the and I should have looked up who this was because I'm not going to be able to get there on my own. But there was some award show and there was a celebrity that was like, when she was accepting her award, she was like, thank goodness I had the abortion when I did because I wouldn't be here if she didn't say it in those words. But remember that?
Yes.
It wasn't that long ago. That to me is alarming. Yes, but I think that is also.
That's Fleetwood Mac, isn't it? What's her name?
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I can't even hardly picture her face right now. I just remember that.
Stevie Nicks, that's it.
No, was it? Was it?
Yeah, I think so.
You should look it up because I feel like you're saying something wrong. I don't feel like it was her.
Well, then it was someone else too, but she.
Oh, did she say that too? Okay, well then that kind of goes against what I'm saying here, which is that those people are really the exception. Because, like I said, the point I'm getting at is that most people do not agree with abortion, even ones who would like there to be, I don't know, more options. I would say they don't necessarily champion abortion. I hope most people we know aren't doing that, and so it becomes this like you said, it gets very difficult to look at this through a Christian lens and also politically, but
it's very interesting because we're both very religious. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I get that we're sitting in front of these microphones allowing who knows to listen to it after we say this. That does take it to a slight different level.
It does.
But as you sit here, I mean, we knew we were going to talk about this and we both wrote stuff down. And yet now that these headphones are on, it's like, I don't know what I really want to say about
Well, no,
this.
and I don't either. So I guess here's my couple of written notes.
Yeah, just read it. Make it
well,
easier.
Because, I kind of went off track here. But when I guess my comment was like, a celebrity touting her abortion is appalling to me. Yeah. I think abortion is morally wrong, not what God intended, and not what most people agree with. Having said that, looking at it politically, I really think that right now there's just only so much we can do. And to your point, I kind of think that we're honestly probably in the best position that we've been in a long time, with Roe v. Wade being overturned. So I don't know. That's all I have to say about that. And then the other thing is, when we do feel strongly about these things, and it is something that does cause the nation to be kind of in turmoil a little bit, I think that's when we have to look at our local circle, mm-hmm. like you're saying, like your town, your city, your state, and put your money in your mouth and your money and your time where your mouth is.
Your mouth. What?
Because and what I mean by that is, you said it earlier. Like we can't overturn or upend Planned Parenthood and then not do something to replace it.
Oh yeah, well we're gonna get to that.
I know.
Stealing my thunder for later on.
Sorry.
Actually had a note for that.
You guys. I said this, was it last week or the week before? Yeah, it was last week. It was just last week, our Power of Prayer episode. And you come up here and you record these things. And then I promise y'all, sometimes it hits you during it, and then sometimes it's not until after. But you're like, who's going to listen to this, and who am I going to offend? It's definitely going to offend someone, and I didn't mean to. And it's hard, getting, like Brian says, getting behind these microphones. It can be so difficult to talk about some of these things, but um, I've been excited to have this conversation because I think we should have
You know
these
how like
hard.
a fire and brimstone service goes now a little bit, I think,
Yeah.
from the delivery end of it.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, because it's just like, obviously I said this last week. I hope you guys always listen through, I don't know, not a lens of grace, but I guess a lens of grace for me and Brian trying to have these hard conversations. But I think, ultimately, if it prompts you to do a little research or look into something or fact check us or whatever and have your own discussions about it, then I think that that's worth it, which is why we sit here and fumble through these sometimes.
Yeah, maybe you shouldn't have come out the gate with this one, but whatever. I decided to go the hardest one first, maybe. I guess this is
And,
the
and
hardest
and
one.
and like 5 minutes ago, you said it was the simple one.
Well, it should be the simple one. And,
It's just difficult, like you said. It's simple in the lens of how we feel about it morally and through a Christian lens. But when you add politics into it, everything gets a little muddier than you think,
yeah, and you
than you
can
like.
go. I'm not going to go very far into this, but I do think when we talk from a national standpoint about abortion, one thing that happens is very rarely, with the exception of, and I swear someone may fact check me on this, but I'm just so you know, I'm usually right. I'm pretty sure it was Stevie Nicks because she said Fleetwood Mac wouldn't exist. Um,
Mm,
but uh, anyways, very rarely will people, to your point, almost champion it.
yeah,
You do see it a little bit more these days, which is kind
it's
of
disturbing.
scary.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I think most of us say, well, I wouldn't do it, but, and there's
Mm-hmm.
always like that, but. And that's kind of where I get to where, like, how much are we getting gaslit by like the media, social media,
How
everything?
much are we voting for a theoretical person that none
Yeah,
of
that
us actually know? Yeah.
exactly. And I'm not saying like you poll your friends, would you have an abortion or not? You know, hopefully most people don't get put in that position to even be thinking about it,
Yeah.
but I just think we're always thinking with I don't want to oppress anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I wouldn't do it, or I know there's other options and stuff like that, maybe somebody else doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think that can almost be a dangerous slope from Christianity because you can start saying that about a whole bunch of things
Mm-hmm.
that you should morally stand on. And I think more so we should really be out there kind of championing life starts at conception, and therefore abortion would be murder. Now, can you
Yeah.
be forgiven of any sin? Yes. So
Mm-hmm.
if you or someone you know has an abortion, that doesn't mean there's not a
You're
path of
doomed. Yeah.
redemption for you. All of us are sinners, but instead of kind of all of us kicking the can down the road and embracing it, and myself included, look, I
Yeah.
just a couple minutes ago said if individual states want to legalize it from a political standpoint, I think that's the best we could get. And therefore I'd be happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the right now. I
Mm-hmm.
wish there would be a movement to kind of rethink that.
Yeah.
But that won't happen until more of us are, I guess you'd say, more vocal. And it doesn't even have to necessarily be with words. It can be with actions, which
I
will,
don't think it should be necessarily with words, probably with
yeah,
action.
because
Yeah.
words can be a lot more empty from all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I there just needs to be longer conversations and thought about what all this actually means. From the political standpoint, I think it gets pushed a lot on the rare exceptions are always what gets brought up as the
Yeah.
rule. You'll hear like, well, in rape or incest or
Mm-hmm.
harm to the mother and stuff like that. And if you do research, all three of those are extremely rare.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Doctors will even tell you from like the danger for a mother's life. That's like, I'm not going to throw. I could throw like a random percentage out. I don't really know what it is, but it's low. Um, And there are ways around that.
Mm-hmm.
It's tricky.
Yeah,
Do some
and it's
research
a
on it.
very deep and dark
I think it's
topic.
one of the Psalms says, I knew you before you were born.
Yeah, you were knit before you were knit in your mother's womb.
Yeah.
Psalm 139.
Yeah, there you go. See, look at that. That'll help us on next week's topic, maybe. All right, so let's move on to the second one.
Yeah.
And this one is just as tricky, yet a little less.
Dark,
Yeah.
slightly.
Yeah, only slightly.
Yeah.
Immigration.
Yeah. I really like your notes on this one, so I think you should jump into it.
That's her saying.
Well, it's just it's a very tricky one because especially like in this day and age, if you say one way or the other, you're immediately, either I don't know. I don't even know the terms that you would be labeled, but it's very polarizing. I feel like all of this is like, and everybody is um, so distanced.
Yeah.
There's so much distance in between. But I think you brought up some really good points.
Let's start in the beginning
Mm-hmm.
from the Bible. You don't even have to get very far in. It's in Leviticus. It's the one most people will say. I think it starts on 33. If a newcomer lives in your land and abides among you, do not reproach him, but let him be among you like one native born, and you shall love him as yourselves. For you were also newcomers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Okay, well, that sums that one up, doesn't it? No, so I was thinking about this a lot, and immigration, whether legal or illegal, honestly, is one of and has been one of the biggest problems we face from a political standpoint and I think a
Yeah.
moral standpoint in this country.
Yes.
And all of us, well, almost all of us, are direct descendants of immigrants from one way or the other
Yeah.
into America. And when I got to thinking, I was like, you know what? There's definitely a good deal of us who can maybe trace our roots back farther.
Yeah.
If you're of especially Eastern European descent or Irish or something like that, you probably came over in the early 1900s, which is where I was really thinking here. And that was all legal immigration for the most part, I think. And those situations were still not very good.
Yeah.
I was thinking, that really kind of bred for the Italians coming over, the mafia. You had a whole bunch of Irish gangs.
Well, I think they were not treated well.
No, exactly. Well, that's what I'm saying. Is my point is the country, like nobody, whether it's legal or illegal, nobody's following this passage out of Leviticus.
No.
Any of us.
No.
When in those days people were coming over, that was all legal immigration, which is what I feel like some people like to throw out is like, well, I'm not against immigration. My ancestors came here legally and stuff like that. And that's true.
Yeah.
And they also had poor treatment by and large, especially if you came over through New York. I always just go mentally to, and this is not something, it's not like a nonfiction movie, but Gangs of New York kind of sums up. That's a fictional movie that is based on fact.
Yeah.
If you come over and you're not set up for success, you're going to breed
A system of failure.
and problems.
Yeah.
And so then you get to today with the illegal immigration. And on one side, you'll hear rhetoric of we need to stop immigration, and on the other, we need to just citizenize everybody. But my point here is really neither one fits the Bible, and neither one really fixes the problem.
Yeah.
So if you just legalize everyone, well, then we're back to kind of how New York was in the early 1900s, where you've got people who are set up, but they're not set up for success in any way, shape, or form. So at that point, you're still not treating any of these people like family, like your
Mm-hmm.
brother. And then at the same time, those people are wanting to come over here for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
They're not leaving their home because they were happy.
Yeah.
They're fleeing something. So, how can you be Christian and not have open arms, open heart for these people?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me personally, this is my personal thought, we need to totally fix the immigration system. Um, and I couldn't tell you who I think has the better
Policy.
Yeah, I really couldn't because this is such a politicized
Yeah.
argument. Honestly, there's been because this has been like I said, this has been going on for decades.
Yeah.
There have been both Republicans, both Democrats. Everyone has had their chance at power. Not a single person has fixed it.
Yeah.
I do think nobody. Yeah, our fence is completely around our house. I was thinking about that. Just not in our yard. Most people have a fence around their property.
Yeah.
Most people don't like strangers just willy-nilly walking onto their property. Therefore, I can totally stand behind having some form of wall.
Physical border.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just so you can process people coming in and out. Just think of it as your house.
Yes, exactly. And I was thinking about this in relation to several other talks that you and I have had in the past, and different sermons that I've heard about kind of the benefits of boundaries, the benefits of, having I'm using air quotes here, but like a fenced in um, place. And just sitting here thinking, like, if I was giving, if there was a need and I was trying to just meet that need with my own money, and I was throwing money at it, which sometimes is my go-to when somebody needs something. But if I don't continue to manage my own money and my own house, then really quickly I run out and I can't help anybody else.
Yeah.
And so then you're all kind of in the same boat of, there's whoever I lent money, that's not going to get them through everything, right? And then we're all kind of in the same boat of just not having it. So I don't know, to use that little example, that little anecdote, I do think there has to be some regulation. I obviously would like to see more attempt at legal immigration.
Yeah.
And then I really like your points about, like, once, like, even if we have legal immigrants coming over, what are we doing for them?
Exactly. And I think that's where we get so caught up in wall or no wall.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very easy to say, like, yeah, there can be a wall. Having a wall doesn't mean people shouldn't be able to come in.
Yeah, we just turn everybody away.
Yeah. And but I do think we get so caught up in the wall or no wall that we don't really get past, like, okay, well, let's say wall, well, then what?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember, obviously, there's people already in the country that are citizens. And then I personally know people who are struggling to get family members over legally because the system's so screwed up.
Right.
And so then they're just left in the cold trying to figure out how to get here. But you have to, it can't just be a one or the other and no other thought. I think to me, if you had some form of border security, okay, then you start looking at the Leviticus. Okay, well, am I doing that right? Well, yeah, because we need to set people up for success.
Yeah.
To be.
And when in places where there isn't a physical border, I know there's violence, and that's what I mean, I know personally people who have a ranch near our southern border, and like to see some of their posts about just strangers roaming through their property, or it's I like shudder. Like, that's
Yeah.
awful. That's not how it should be.
No, exactly. Well, and that's not what, like I said, I feel like it gets taught around and people start to feel guilty of like, well, if I'm pro like a border wall or something, well then am I really Christian? Like,
Yeah.
that's not what the Bible says. But the Bible says to love them as yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And just letting anyone come in, no checks, no helping them out. Because I got news for you. If you're here as an illegal immigrant, it is, I'm not going to say impossible, but the deck is stacked against you from being able to succeed.
Yes.
You're not a citizen. You don't have a social security card. You don't have a driver's license.
Starting from complete scratch a
Yeah.
lot of times.
And not that you can't end up finding a way to get those things, but that's
It's an uphill
where
battle.
like I work in construction. I know a lot of people that get paid by cash because they're not citizens. And guess what? Some of them are more talented than people that are citizens, and they have to take less. It's impossible for them. They can't get a fair shake at it.
Yeah.
And so I see that every day, and I feel bad for those people. And so that's where I look at this: love them as yourselves. Like
You're making a good point here.
If you're letting people over illegally, you're not loving them as yourself. You're setting them. Maybe they're still living a better life than they were fleeing from. I get that, but that's not supposed to be the point here. Yeah. And that's where I'm saying, like, even in the people that were coming through New York, they weren't being set up for success. They were getting dropped into an
impossible situation.
Yeah, and the Irish had to stick with the Irish, Italians had to stick with the Italians, and that's where you get to where a lot of the things we're seeing in the news and stuff are happening. Now, it's just the same thing that's been happening.
Yes.
So really, it needs to be more of a focus on, for us as Christians, the focus needs to be on, we need to help people that want to get here and want to succeed and want to be here. And I was thinking, from an education standpoint, you have to have a plan. From a housing standpoint, these are some of the things that we're all paying taxes. I'd gladly see my money go for stuff like that to help get people started on the path of success.
Well, and you made a good point earlier when we were talking about some of these notes about how we do have some of these institutions in place and they're being kind of misused, like the lower income housing.
Yeah, like government. I mean, government housing does exist.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think, on a broader topic, that's in its essence is supposed to be more of like a halfway help get you up off your feet. If you've already been here and you've fallen on hard times, that's there for you. If you're an immigrant coming over, hey, here's something here for you. But it's
a landing place for some.
We're supposed to be the land of opportunity. That's not supposed to be
the end.
Yeah. And I think that if you view that as the end, if that's how society's set up, then that just breeds
negative cycle.
Yeah, negative. I was gonna use like unhappiness or something. I don't even know if that's a word. I don't know what word to say here. Negativity. There we go.
Yes.
Breeds negativity, which is gonna raise crime and just not. It's not what we're meant here for.
Yes.
And then another thing that I was thinking, and I noticed this a lot with the Olympics, and not from the political side of it. Forget all of that. There needs to be more of a love of this country. And I'm not saying someone needs to sing the Star Spangled Banner to be able to walk through the border wall that we're imaginarily constructing. But I am just saying, like, we really need to kind of get back for, hey, we're all here. Like, what that's supposed to symbolize is kind of like this Bible verse to me. Like, we're supposed to love each other as ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's in this country. I'm not saying you love the flag because of a political party or because you've lived here. That's supposed to be a representation of like all of us.
Yeah, and I think what we're talking about here is like basically the negative cycle of immigration, right? And so to revert it toward a positive cycle, I think instilling some patriotism would be amazing. It makes me think of I got a scholarship to A&M, and it was the Terry Foundation Scholarship. And one of the questions that they asked, I don't remember if it was in like the final interview or even maybe like the post interview after they had awarded, but they made a big deal about giving back to the Terry Foundation when you could. And that's what keeps everything going,
Yeah.
is scholars that were given an opportunity that they wouldn't have had otherwise, and now they're able to capitalize on that, make something of themselves, and then give some back to that foundation for the next generation.
Yeah.
And so, same thing here with immigration. If we are treating these people right and setting them up as best we can, with good opportunities, then hopefully they are treating this as a halfway, like, I'm using housing as like an example, but that's a stepping stone into something greater. And then when they've moved into a better position, they're grateful for the opportunity that they've been given.
Yeah.
They attribute it to our nation, and then maybe they are setting up the next generation. They're helping set up the next generation for those same opportunities that they were given.
Yeah, I was thinking about it in terms of work. One of the things we do is, I say we, the company does.
Mm-hmm.
If,
David Weekly, give him a shout out.
Yeah, if you're working as a trade in the field, say, so I have 3 boys, and let's say I'm a plumber and working for a company, and my sons work with me. They'll send your kids to trade school or whatever if they want to carry on that legacy or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and try to help them get some business classes and give them an opportunity. They don't have to do it, but it's an opportunity for them to maybe, if they were working for a company, be able to start their own company or just be more proficient.
Yeah.
Like if they are Spanish speaking or something, try to help get them on a better path to maybe move up,
Yeah.
go from being just the laborer to maybe now you can be a superintendent or even a business owner at some point if you want to. And so I think any candidate you're looking at, and this is beyond just the national election, look at it at your state and local levels. If there's not a plan for how to make it better, then it's really doing nothing anyways. Not from the Christian standpoint,
Right.
not from what we're taking out of the Bible. And we may as well just drop this nugget in here. For a lot of us, we'll vote one way, think one way, do one way, but none of these changes can happen without us all doing more.
Yeah.
If you feel strongly one way or another about immigration or about abortion or about anything else, morally that you feel Christianity needs to be represented with, we have to do things. We have to volunteer or donate money, be active, time,
Yeah.
all these things. It's, if we're just talking about it, and I'm one of them. The reason Darcy said I know more about this stuff, because I do listen to it and read about it, and I would be lying if I told you that I am really active in any one thing with any of this. But it is something that I thought about this week because we were going to talk about it. I don't have all the answers of what I'm going to do or anything like that, but I do think it goes beyond just complaining about it. It goes beyond just voting. If your elected officials don't have a plan, I don't know, maybe it's you write them a letter and say, this is what you should do. I'm not saying that may not fall on deaf ears, but I do think we can't just hide behind saying we're voting for one thing or another, because nobody, to my knowledge, has everything figured out the way we're supposed to have it. Like, and I'm saying obviously from a biblical standpoint. And I do think it's time for us to kind of stand up and try to help make that happen.
Yeah. Squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Oh.
So, well, I mean, you're talking about
I
stepping
know.
up. You're laughing at my. I'm not. But it's true. And sometimes that can be annoying because a lot of times I feel like the squeaky wheel you might disagree with, but
yeah.
but it is, it's true, and it's an opportunity for us. Squeaky is a negative connotative word, but we should we should educate ourselves and have these conversations and speak out. And are we going to get to our third topic?
Yeah, we'll
Or
touch on it quickly because it's not as
because
it's
there's
not front and center of this political cycle, anyways.
yeah
But just as an interesting one, the
yeah
death penalty.
yeah
I think this is one that sometimes gets overlooked,
hmm
especially these days. It used to not. I feel like when
right.
I was younger, that was like
No, I
some of
feel
the
the same.
big controversy going around, which states had the death penalty and stuff like that.
Hmm
Um, Sadly, I feel like the death penalty comes down to an economic decision a lot of times, like
Yeah.
whether to have it or not,
Yeah.
because housing prisoners
Yes. It's
is
expensive.
expensive.
Hmm
Kind of where I want to focus here, and it still goes to the point I was just making about us having to do more to make the difference. Um, this is not going to be an apples to apples thing, but just kind of thinking of prisons in general, I do think a little bit. Not, I'm not saying anyone who's in prison does not deserve to be there and everyone should just get out. I'm not saying that, but I am saying I do think to a small degree, some of us, at least me in the past, um, get caught up in the lock 'em up, throw 'em. Like if I'm not pro death penalty, I'm lock 'em up, throw away the key.
Yeah.
And while there's absolutely circumstances where that probably is the right answer,
hmm
I think more and more some of us get you because here's what happens: you get numb to that stuff.
Yeah.
And I won't share the whole details of this, but I served on a jury trial, and the
Grand jury.
no, just regular jury.
Okay. I couldn't
Um,
remember.
and the party was guilty, and we ruled him guilty, and then we started throwing around the sentencing, and it was one of those where it's 25 to life, and everyone or the guy was guilty, and everyone wanted to just do life, and I wasn't necessarily opposed to that, but what I was opposed to was the simple way everyone was just going around the table
Throwing
saying,
that around.
yeah. And so it's
When it is
always,
a person's life that we're talking about.
and the guy was guilty. So here's where it really puts you in a little bit of a pickle. We all agreed he was guilty, yet I had to be the one to make us stop. And it wasn't a hung jury at that point because we'd already found him guilty, but we were on the sentencing part, and it was all on the same day. I think that's normally how it goes. It was the only one I've ever served on. Probably won't get picked again. So, anyways, everyone was getting frustrated with me because I was just like, I am not just gonna immediately say life in prison with no parole.
Yeah.
Lightly. Like we're gonna at least sit here for a while and talk about it
Yeah.
and at least think about what that means.
hmm
And what I mean by that is I think a lot of us get numb to these things,
Yeah.
and you just need to give it a lot more thought, and a lot more thought to if we all believe that if you turn your life over to Jesus, you can be redeemed, you can be
Yeah.
saved. I'm not saying that means you should get out of prison. Don't get me twisted here, but I am just saying we should really take that to heart
Yeah.
before we're making these decisions. That doesn't mean that gentleman is ever going to do that or that he should get out of prison for that. But I just think it's something that we start getting
We can
numb
talk
to
out of and we can talk
throwing
out of
around.
both sides of our mouths on that.
Exactly.
We go to church and say, we all deserve forgiveness, and then, we go serve on some kind of jury or get
Yeah.
in some kind of discussion with somebody about these topics, and we're quick to hang people.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like I said, don't get me twisted here. I'm not saying people can't have life
Yeah.
sentences. I am saying biblically, you can choose however you want, but technically, the death penalty is not agreed with from if you're Catholic from the Catholic Church.
hmm
Um, And here's the reason why. And it's, if you watch any of these Netflix documentaries, there have been people that have been put to death that were later found to be innocent, and therefore that's the low hanging fruit of
Right.
against that. Nobody would want that to happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
You only have one life. But so with this, I'm just more on, I guess you'd say, prison reform a little bit. And I don't know, I'm not really well versed on this. Maybe prison reform's gotten a lot better in the last 20 years. I have no idea.
I was about to say, like, from my experience, as if I've been
What are
locked
you
up,
not
but
telling me?
from what I know from a handful of people I'm acquainted with, I think it very much varies location to location.
That I would believe without a doubt. You could be making that up. I'd believe it. Anyways, as Christians, we should be more looking on what are we doing to help the people in prison to not necessarily get out, but find the way
Yes.
to Jesus and salvation. And
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, if they choose that path, that will help make them better people and not make such poor decisions.
Yeah. Agreed.
With with that, I think we've talked on. Or do you have something else? You look
Well,
like you have something.
no, I just was, I had, like my post notes, which some of this we have covered per the topics, but I, once again, I think I'll say, like, on all of these topics, and here, let me back up. Here's my struggles with this, because I
All right.
mentioned in the beginning that this topic kind of made me go, okay. And it's because a lot of this I can keep at arm's distance,
Yeah.
which I don't think is necessarily right. But what I struggle with is I am a data, a knowledge is power kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
But, and so I want to be informed. But I also like to stay grounded.
Right.
And I'm not saying that it hasn't been like this for thousands of years, but I'm just going to say in this day and age, the two,
Yeah.
it's hard for them to coexist, for you to try to be well informed and, about like all of the goings on in your community, your state, your nation, and also stay grounded. That's a struggle I have. I'm not saying I do it well, because I don't, but, so a couple of things that I was thinking about is, for me, I think that I would like to dig up a news source that I felt like I could rely on and read it, because, and I
Oh
say
yeah.
read it specifically because I feel like reporting isn't maybe what it used to be from both sides.
Right.
From both sides, and also that, like, because of the way media has transformed, that everybody's looking for sound bites. That's what we get a lot of, or like
Mm-hmm.
sound bites and headlines and all this stuff, and it can be very hard to sort through.
Well, I think you also get swayed more. Like print is an interesting thought because while you can be swayed by the author's tone of writing, it's a lot harder.
Yes.
Whereas because you can literally see someone's face and either like them or
Mm-hmm.
not like them, and that's gonna change your
Yeah,
viewpoint
determine.
of what they're
Mm-hmm.
saying. Slash, people who are good speakers. I mean,
They can be convincing.
well, that's sales, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know that you're a
I know that.
salesperson. If you're a good orator, then
Right.
you're going to be able to convince more people.
And I do think that this is also because audio versus visual. I'm a visual person.
Yeah.
Very much so. So I just think, for me, and so this isn't like my mass advice to everybody listening, maybe, but for me, that is something that maybe I'd like to try, is dig around and find, and not just one source either,
Yeah.
but multiple sources, but a handful of sources that I feel I could trust, and try to stay on top of things. And then I do always try to, not, I'm going to say, try to see things from both sides. And not that I mean that I don't come down one way or another. It's more so
Mm-hmm.
just that I at least try to see where people are coming from, because I think that says a lot about, um, I don't know, where they're coming from, I guess. I don't know how to finish that thought. It gives
I was trying to
perspective.
figure out where we're at.
It just gives the perspective of, maybe they're failing at the execution, but if they're coming from a good place, you can at least understand that.
Gotcha.
And I don't know. Anyway, and then something that I have been focusing on is focusing on our circle, like your
Oh yeah.
circle, what you can control, what you
Yes.
can grow in, what you can nurture. For us, that's our immediate family, and then even our extended family, primarily, but also
Friends, close
acquaintances,
friends. Yeah.
coworkers, all of that. So focusing on our circle, having these conversations, forcing myself on the microphone for topics like politics,
Yeah.
you know. And then the other thing is, if there's something, we kind of mentioned this earlier, where like with abortion, we know how we feel about it, but politically it can be kind of a hairy situation on that end. And in those situations, I think that people used to put a lot more time and money in their church
Okay.
to be the starting point of reform.
Yeah.
And somewhere that's, I feel like, gotten lost. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's probably across the board. Maybe the churches aren't doing the missions because the money's not there, the leadership's not there, or whatever, and so then there's not a mission to give money to. But I don't know whether it was the chicken or the egg there, probably both, but the wheels just came off the cart. But and I know some do a good job. I'm not saying that there's not some out there that do, but trying to find something that you do feel passionately about. For example, I think that we're really blessed in this community to have Brenham Pregnancy Center, in regards to their post-abortion care, their really from all of it,
Uh
like
huh.
the support that they provide moms. We were talking about, like, we don't want Planned Parenthood, but then what replaces that to support somebody who may have already had an abortion and needs support,
Mm-hmm.
or somebody who's considering it, and we want them to have good Christian counseling, right? And so I think that we're really blessed to have Brenham Pregnancy Center in Brenham, and so maybe like volunteering there or seeing what we can help out with there. I'm sure we've got some diapers that are out of size that we can donate, but different things like that. Point is, just putting your money where your mouth is, your time where your mouth is, and trying to cause change and growth within your circle that then hopefully leads to something more.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was probably word salading, trying to say earlier. You can't just want some of these things to go away or just vote for them and just think magically everything's going to fix itself, because it's not.
Yeah.
Even if things get voted, I mean, this is what happens. Frankly, you elect the person who said all the things you wanted,
Yeah.
and guess what? Those things still don't happen. We've seen that happen for
Well,
years
because
and
also
years.
even what we've been talking about today isn't as simple as we've been talking. Like, we
It
said
wasn't as simple as it was for us talking, because that was hard.
well, no, I just mean, like, for example, we listed some things out on immigration that we think like we could benefit from doing XYZ.
Yeah.
But
Boom,
doing
done.
XYZ, is not simple.
No, it's
So,
a huge undertaking.
yeah, exactly.
No, and I do get your point. I think just from the abortion standpoint, and then the Planned Parenthood tied in with that. And then some people probably don't even agree with the pregnancy centers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Then you do need something.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then get involved in your church and find out,
All right.
what do we donate to? What can replace this? Because people do need an outlet. You do need options for those who do need care and are
Yes.
in need. I think one thing that gets tossed around a lot is, if you're anti-abortion, then you're pro-adoption. But you know what? That's a system that has its own set of problems. So
yeah.
what are you going to do to help fix that?
Yeah.
And so none of these, a lot of these are simple answers that you can find in the Bible that can tell you one way to fall or not. And I think this is why it gets confusing politically, is there's 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 the Bible, and then there's what's actually happening.
Yeah.
Here's what you can read, and you know what? If all of us would follow it, the world would be a simpler place,
Yeah.
but we don't. And so we all have to be there and
kind of work alongside each other.
Yeah, kind of like your inner circle. Like if everyone focused on their inner circles, then a lot of us would already be kind of taken care of by our own circles.
Yeah.
And you know what? If you know people who don't have that inner circle, it's time to let them into yours.
Yeah.
In however you.
This
can
is
find
like
a
a broader topic about taking care of your own kind of. I think
well,
I could
but that's
go down
kind
that
of
trail.
well, that's kind of what you get into with this, and we're about to be over anyway, so we won't harp on this long. But I think that's if there was a couple of themes to take out of this, it's
listen to us with grace.
Yes, first and foremost. Secondly, kind of do your own research and reflection on a lot of these. And we picked these because some of these are like the big topics that everyone keeps talking about.
Yeah.
And frankly, I don't really know how to tie economics into the Bible. You could, but that'd be its
there's
own
plenty
topic.
of parables, but then there's also some that you would almost think
and we'd be on here for a long time with me just rambling stuff.
Yeah.
But do some research in the Bible as well as in the media. Don't get so caught up on a D or an R next to somebody's name, I think. I think you should really look at the values and what can, I guess I will go with the Pope, start looking at everything and find out which one you think is the better chance to helping affirm Christianity.
Yeah.
And help us grow the faith, I guess.
A final thought from me too, and then we really can wrap this up too. But this was actually, I think, your mom the other day, because in regards to like trying to stay grounded, and sometimes politically she can have trouble, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Like admittedly of her own saying. But she said something the other day about, because she and I are both on the same Bible in a year thing, and she was like, I just read the end of, I think it was Genesis or Exodus, and she was like, I feel better about life because they were screwed up then too, and
right,
that kind of centered her a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that. Stay grounded somehow.
Yeah, but that was hard.
That was hard.
That was a lot harder than I thought it would be.
I knew it was going to be harder than you thought it would be, but
it typically is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I hope that cleared a bunch of things up for you.
Or at least sparked discussion.
Yeah. A lot of people are probably like, oh my God, what are you doing? If you made it this far.
Yeah, if you made it this far.
Mm-hmm. We probably won't do this again, this exact topic. If you want any more information, you can always direct message us at discuss_with_us.
Yeah.
And
we'll do our best.
Yeah. We're going to do something a little bit easier. Darcy just kind of mentioned the Bible in a year.
Yeah.
Which we're not just going to fully follow that, but I think we're going to talk about just how to...
The importance of Bible study, how overwhelming just looking at the Bible can be if you have never read it before or don't know where to start or trying to get back into it. So I think that'll be a topic.
Yeah, so she's going to help us lead the way on that next week. Hopefully that'll be easy because we do have the fair this week, so we may get some pictures of the boys at the carnival and looking at all the animals, stuff like that, to take your mind off of all these dirty politics. But anyways, as we unpacked
politics and Christianity,
there we go. You go discuss.